Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. I am not sure why I had my glasses on in the last podcast. I wasn't reading anything. It was a mistake, and I apologize. I guess. Not that it hurt anybody, but I guess I'm apologizing to myself for whatever reason. I wanted to clarify something I said in the previous podcast because I think that I was unclear in how I stated it, or maybe I had not worked it out sufficiently well in my head and did not explain it adequately because of that, something like that. What I said is that our dreams are not really that important in terms of their content. In other words, interpreting the actual specifics of what does this dream mean is not that important. In many cases, our dreams are jarbled anyway, don't really make much sense outwardly. The content is kind of confusing, in many cases silly. Not always, not always. I mean, I have had dreams where I thought that the content of the dream was really, really important, meaning the actual imagery that I saw, the words that I heard were important, but not usually, in my opinion. I think whether that is true, meaning that the content of the dream is or is not important, depends upon the dream. But here is what I think is always important, that the interpretation of the dream is intuitive. And that is true irrespective of whether the content makes sense or not. So sometimes I have seen dreams that seemed like they were literal events. Other times I have seen dreams that appeared to be rather foolish. Does that matter? Well, it matters if I am expecting the dream to be literally true. And when I was younger, I did. And so I would try to interpret my dreams literally, not metaphorically. But even the idea of interpreting a dream metaphorically may be an exaggeration, because that assumes that perhaps if I can figure out what is the symbolic significance of a particular word or of particular words, that I can understand the dream. And I am not convinced that that is always true either. So all I think I can say with some degree of integrity, with some degree of honesty, is that what matters to the dream is the message, is the intuition, or the inspiration that it carries. Sometimes that intuition or inspiration may be directly related to the content of the dream, meaning what I see in the dream, what I hear in the dream, may actually be the message, or at least may be a part of the message. In other cases, maybe not. Maybe what I see in the dream or hear in the dream is largely irrelevant, meaning, as I said in the previous podcast, but did not clarify this point successfully, in my opinion, what matters is that the dream is a vehicle for inspiration or intuition. And to me, that is the furthest that I am willing to go with a dream. Because I realize that dreams, most of my dreams anyway, are silly. And if I tried to interpret them, I would end up with nonsense. There are people who do try to interpret nonsense. You buy some books on dream interpretation, and they attempt to assign quote unquote meaning to specific events, while in my view, they are simply assigning meaning to things that are devoid of meaning. So, my view is that what matters in the dream, irrespective of whether the content of the dream makes sense or not, I don't think that really matters. It is what I learn from it. What have I learned from this dream? Sometimes what I learn may be related to the literal dream. In other words, sometimes what I see, what I hear in the dream may be what the dream is intended to teach me. Perhaps. Perhaps. I think it's better to wait and reflect on it. Reflection is always a good idea when it comes to dreams. But in other cases, our dreams may be purely nonsense. And I must admit, that is usually the case with my dreams. I don't usually remember my dreams, as I said. One dream I do remember from when I was a child, and I don't know how old. If I had to guess, I would say maybe 10 or 11, something like that. That I saw this school bus, and the school bus was oscillating like it had waves in it. Very odd. You don't generally see waves or oscillations in the skin or the lining of a school bus, but that's what I saw. And so I walked up to somebody and I said, "What is that? Why is the school bus making that kind of weird motion on the outside?" And the person said, "Oh, that's where the children are. That's where they live. They live inside the lining of the school bus." Obviously, that makes no sense. The logical question to have asked is, well, then why aren't I in that lining? But to the best of my recollection, I never asked that question. Why? Because dreams generally are not logical. Dreams generally do not make sense. Literally do not make sense. So rather than try to make sense out of nonsense, I think it is best to wake up and then to see what thoughts come into one's mind. Before I go to bed, I almost always ask Horia, the black-eyed maiden of white light, my translation of Horia. A Holy Spirit, the most great Holy Spirit, who lives in this age, who provides us all with inspiration, who is available to any of us who seeks her. And she is a she. She is a female, not a female human being, but a different species. I guess you could call it the species of Holy Spirits. Like Eve, like the dove, like Gabriel, and like Shiva, and many others. A species of Holy Spirits, with Horia as the most exalted one among them. And why I think she's the most exalted one, I'll table that for now. I have a reason for saying that, but I don't want to say what my reason is at this point. Maybe at some time in the future I will. I haven't decided, or actually, I have decided, and what I've decided is that, at least for now, I will not say what I mean by that. I will not say why I think that she is the most great spirit, or the most great Holy Spirit, or even why I call her Horia. Although the translation of Horia as the black-eyed maiden of white light, while I think a very accurate translation from the Arabic, is entirely my own translation. So if it is wrong, you can only blame me. It's only my fault. You're free to disagree with my translation, but that is my translation of Horia. And so, dreams, in my view, are like vehicles or carriages or, I don't know, starships, spaceships, something, vehicles of some sort that carry meaning from the dream into our waking life. And sometimes that meaning may have no clear correspondence to the dream itself. At least that has been my experience. I very rarely will see any correspondence between the dream and the intuition I receive after the dream. However, I should add, it has only been relatively recently that I've looked for correspondences between dreams and my intuitions. Now I think that many of my intuitions come from my dreams, but I did not always think that way. That is a relatively new idea for me. Now, with my closeness to Horia, my love for Horia, my regard for Horia as my beloved wife, I will pray to her before going to bed and will ask her for inspiration. Sometimes, maybe usually, that inspiration is on specific topics. At other times, it's not. It's more generalized. Please guide me in some direction. In terms of the dream I reported before in the previous podcast, and if you are wondering what it was, go back and watch it. I actually prayed for inspiration on that topic before I went to bed. Actually, a few nights earlier. But then the inspiration came to me that morning. It came to me that morning. I'm sorry for getting choked up. But even though this is not entirely new to me now, I have had this level of empathy in my heart for about 20 years. I spent the first 48 years of my life without it. And so it still feels very new to me. For me, this type of guidance that I believe I am receiving from Horia, at least as I see it, and it's only my own personal viewpoint, I need to emphasize that. I'm not speaking as any kind of authority because I have absolutely no authority whatsoever. But this kind of intuition I've been receiving has lately been preceded by praying to Horia before going to bed and asking for guidance, either in general or specifically. And so far, almost always at some point, the inspiration will come to me and I will be guided in some direction. In some direction, it may not be the direction I anticipated, which I guess is good because that means I'm learning. But I'm being guided either to do something, to see things in a different way, to see a particular person in a different way. Maybe somebody I've resented. And to be honest with you, as with many, if not most autistics, I have a plethora of resentments against people. A plethora of resentments. More than enough to fill an encyclopedia. The harm that people have done to me. Now, am I complaining? No, I'm reporting. I'm reporting. I'm not complaining. Because whatever harm people had done to me, whether they were adults, which they were in many cases, as recently as a year ago, when someone threatened to strangle me for cursing out his wife, which I never did. Or as a child, Now, that first situation is rather significant to me because it appears to me as though the wife, and I won't reveal her name, obviously, initially believed her husband that he did not do that. Then suddenly they disappeared. Nobody has seen them for ages, well, months. And people used to see them all the time. So my suspicion is, and it's only a suspicion, well, they live together, they're husband and wife, that eventually he told her the truth, that yes, he did threaten to strangle me. And because they both know that I am around sometimes where they used to go, they have both disappeared. And that was so unnecessary. So unnecessary. All that either one of them had to do was to call me up and apologize. Have a conversation with me. I mean, I'm a reasonable guy. I'm a heartful guy. I care about people. I would openly and gratefully accept their apology. But they haven't done that. I suspect they're embarrassed because especially the wife said some rather ugly things about me, like wanting me to leave the area. I don't think that she thought they would get back to me, but the person that she told probably shouldn't have told me in retrospect, did tell me. And then she found out that he told me, honestly, through me, indirectly, which maybe is my own fault. But I mentioned it to someone because this was a very traumatic period of my life. Right after I moved down here to the Rio Grande Valley, that was the kind of welcoming that I had to this area, was by those two people who treated me like trash. Both of them, in different ways. Obviously, I still have some anger. But my anger is not really an anger so much at them. It's an anger at the situation because it can so easily be resolved. If only they would call me. So what disturbs me more than anything is the apparent lack of trust they have in me. They seem to have demonized me in some way or on some level. I have thought about calling them. I have. And I have no problem doing that. It certainly would not be an ego issue for me. But I've thought about it, and I just don't think that would be an appropriate thing to do. In fact, I think that would be the wrong thing to do. I think that could cause negative things to happen, whether to me or to them. And I won't get more specific than that. But they can call me if they want to and admit what they did and apologize, and I will accept their apology. I will. I am a man of my word. Will they ever see this podcast? Needle in a haystack. Needle in a haystack is all I can think of. Needle in a haystack. But regardless, going back to the main subject here, from which I've deviated severely, that of dreams. My dreams have not always been good, especially when I was a child and was being beaten up by kids every school day. My dreams were often nightmares. That was the vehicle. That was only the vehicle. In my view, there is no point in trying to interpret a nightmare. In most cases, there's no point in trying to interpret a dream. Outwardly, I mean. Maybe in some cases, but in most cases, I would say no. The meaning of the dream, the interpretation of the dream, is the intuition that one receives after waking up. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.